Have you ever felt like you've loved someone from a previous life? Not a passing déjà vu, not a fleeting sense of recognition, but something deeper, unshakable. A quiet certainty in your bones that you've known this person before. Time itself knew your name. That their eyes don't just look at you, they remember you. This isn't just poetic longing. It's a question that has haunted the deepest corners of human consciousness for centuries. What if love isn't something we find, but something we remember? Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, believed in the existence of a collective unconscious, a realm beneath our individual psyche that holds the memories, symbols, and experiences of the entire human race. In that vast, dreamlike place, time does not follow our linear rules. There, we carry traces of archetypes, stories, and maybe echoes of those we've loved before. He called it the self, the deepest, truest core of who we are. And unlike the ego, the self is not bound by time or form. It is timeless, ancient, ever becoming. If love were to transcend time, it would happen not through the fleeting attraction of ego, but through the recognition of the self in another. Imagine this. A young woman dreams repeatedly of a man she has never seen in waking life. In her dream, he sits beside her beneath an ancient tree, speaking in a language she doesn't know, yet fully understands. She wakes each time with tears in her eyes. No pain, just loss, a kind of absence that doesn't belong to this world. Months later, on a train she almost missed, she sits across from a man reading a book in a language she doesn't speak. He looks up. Their eyes meet. They both freeze briefly, but, in that instant, something unspoken surges between them. A familiarity too deep for first meetings. Not recognition of the face, but of the presence. Is this fantasy? Coincidence? Or is it something else? A glimpse into the unconscious field Jung described, where the boundaries between lifetimes blur, where memory and myth intertwine. Jung believed the psyche is not bound by the physical, that the human soul moves through cycles of individuation across lifetimes, encountering symbols, people, and stories again and again, each time with a chance to integrate what was left undone. If love, then, is not merely emotional attraction but the meeting of two inner selves, then perhaps what we feel as love at first sight is not truly first at all. It may be the return. In dreams, people often describe lovers they've never met. Names they don't know. Places they've never been. These images, Jung argued, are not random. They are archetypes, universal patterns deeply embedded in our psyche. The eternal feminine, the divine masculine, the lost twin soul. Our dreams don't invent these patterns, they recall them. Sometimes, these dreams prepare the soul. Sometimes, they echo a truth we've forgotten. So, when we feel drawn inexplicably to someone, when the pull is not logical, but gravitational, Jung might say we are experiencing not mere desire but psychic memory. A moment where the collective unconscious sends up a signal. You've been here before. You've loved here before. This does not mean the other person remembers, nor does it guarantee that love will unfold smoothly in this life. What transcends time often disturbs space. A love born in the unconscious carries both beauty and weight, because it brings with it all that was unfinished. Sometimes we are not meant to find someone in this life to keep. Sometimes we meet them only to awaken ourselves. Love, in Jung's view, was never meant to fix us. It was meant to reveal us, to show us the shadow, the wound, the divine, all in one mirror. When a love transcends time, it is not soft or easy. It is recognition at the level of soul. It breaks us open, but in that breaking, something extraordinary can happen. A remembering, not just of the other, but of ourselves. So perhaps the question isn't, have you loved someone in a past life? Perhaps the better question is, what part of you still remembers? Real love, Carl Jung believed, is not merely the collision of two. Heartsit is the meeting of two selves. It is not just emotion or passion, but recognition, the kind that feels like a mirror held up to your soul. To truly love, Jung said, is to see yourself in the other, not in the surface reflections, but in the depths, where the unconscious breathes and the archetypes stir. Jung's idea of the self was not a personality trait or identity. It was the wholeness we strive toward, the integration of all parts of our psyche, the ego, the shadow, the animus or anima, and the unconscious. And in this journey toward wholeness, love plays a role far more sacred than what we're often taught. Love, when it transcends egoic need and projection, becomes a catalyst. It becomes the alchemical fire in which we are transformed. He wrote often about this in his private journals, and most notably in The Red Book, a mystical, dreamlike collection of his inner visions. There, love is not described as comfort, it is disruption, awakening, the dissolving of the false self. It is not soft, but sacred, and often it is painful. To Jung, the most transformative love is archetypal. That is, it follows a pattern older than us, deeper than biography. Cultures throughout history have echoed this pattern. The twin flames, the soulmates separated by fate, the divine feminine and masculine eternally, longing for union. These are not just myths. They are psychic structures, symbols embedded in the human soul. In every romantic obsession, Jung saw the anima or animus at work, the inner image of the opposite that each of us carries within. When we fall in love, especially intensely, it is often this inner image we are projecting outward. But sometimes, rarely, we meet someone whose presence matches this inner image so precisely, it pierces the illusion. What we experience then is not projection. It is presence. It is the self in one, recognizing the self in another. That kind of love is rare. And when it comes, it does not necessarily stay. Perhaps no relationship in Jung's life illustrates this more than his connection with Sabine Spielrein. She was not just a patient, she was a brilliant mind, a soul with whom Jung engaged in one of the most intellectually and emotionally complex bonds of his life. Their love was not tidy. It was not proper. It was not meant to be completed in the traditional sense, but it was real. Sabine awakened in Jung something he would later explore deeply: the convergence of psychology and soul, the way the feminine animates the masculine unconscious. In her presence, Jung encountered not only Sabine's brilliance and trauma, but his own anima. She became both muse and mirror. And he, to her, was the same. Their connection never resolved into a conventional relationship. It was cut short by ethics, by society, by Jung's marriage, by time itself. Yet the echo of that relationship reverberated through Jung's work. Her influence can be felt in his evolving concept of the self, in the Red Book's luminous feminine figures, and in his lifelong exploration of what love reveals. It's here that we arrive at a difficult truth. The love that transcends time is not defined by its fulfillment. It is defined by its impossibility. This is the first twist. We imagine that the most sacred love ends in union. But what if the most powerful loves are those that never fully complete themselves? What if the absence is what makes them eternal? What if their unfinished nature is what allows them to live forever in the psyche? In Jung's own words from The Red Book, the soul of man is like the light of the sun that casts a shadow. In that light, we see ourselves. In that shadow, we find what we've lost. And love, when it touches the soul, is always both light and shadow. There is an unbearable beauty in a love that cannot be held. It lives not in the day-to-day, but in dreams, in symbols, in silence. It appears in a scent that reminds you of someone long gone, in a line of poetry that stings without reason, in a song you skip because it knows too much. These are not accidents. They are psychic reverberations, echoes of a meeting that changed the structure of your inner world. And that is the mark of a true soul. Encounter it alters you. It shifts something in the landscape of your being, not with promises or plans, but with presence, with recognition, with the terrifying and tender feeling of being seen all the way through. What we often misunderstand about love, Jung would say, is that it is not here to complete us. It is here to wake us. The other is not our missing half. They are a doorway, a living symbol of what still sleeps within us. So when we say that love is the reflection of the self, we do not mean it is easy or serene. We mean it is luminous and disruptive. It tears open the veil between who we think we are and who we might become. It brings the ego into contact with the anima, or animus, the soul's other half. And that confrontation is not romance. It is revolution. The beauty of this kind of love is not in what it gives, but in what it reveals. You don't just find the other person, you find your longing, your projections, your shadows, and if you are brave enough, you begin the long walk inward. Jung never claimed this was easy, nor did he promise happy endings. In fact, he warned us, the greatest loves are the most dangerous, because they do not offer safety, they offer transformation, and not all souls are ready for that fire. But if you are willing to look at love not as possession but as portal, you may begin to see differently. You may look back on a love that broke you and whisper, "Thank you." You may recall a connection that never made sense and realize, "It made me who I am." Not all love is meant to last, but some love is meant to wake you. And that, Jung would say, is enough. Time, according to Carl Jung, is not linear. It is not a straight line from past to present to future. It is a spiral, a symbol, a layered web of memory and myth. In the realm of the unconscious, time folds in on itself. What was once lived can be relived. What has not yet happened may already exist as an image, a dream, a haunting whisper from the future. Jung believed that the unconscious is not bound by the constraints of chronology. In dreams, we do not follow time. We dissolve it. We return to childhood. We leap into what feels like another life. And sometimes, we encounter someone who does not belong to any chapter we remember writing. A figure without name, without a face we can describe, and yet we know them. How do you explain the deep familiarity of a stranger in your sleep? The way you wake up with your chest aching as if you've said goodbye to someone you've never met? How do you account for the sense of home that lingers, even though the person is gone the moment your eyes open? Jung might say this is the voice of the collective unconscious, that vast ocean beneath our individual minds, where symbols, memories, and archetypes flow freely between us. In that sea, time is a veil, and occasionally, that veil grows thin. A soul from beyond the linear enters your dream not as fantasy, but as reminder. He wrote of such moments in his journal's visions in which he walked among ancient souls, symbols of past selves, and companions who spoke to him, not in language, but in essence. During a near-death experience in 1944, Jung described leaving his body and hovering far above the earth. He saw a temple made of light, and inside, a presence, not an angel, not a god, but something vast and intimate. There, he felt he belonged. He wrote that it was not a dream, it was a remembering. In that space, he sensed what he later described as a return to the self. Not just his own, but a universal selfa mandala, a circle within a square, within a larger circle-perfect symmetry, a symbol of psychic wholeness. For Jung, the mandala represented more than inner balance. It represented the soul's totality, and when two mandalas touch two selves in their truest form, the love that arises is beyond time. beyond story, beyond ego. Have you ever dreamt of someone who does not belong to this world? Not in the sense that they are surreal, but in the sense that their presence carries too much gravity for dream logic. They sit beside you in silence. They touch your hand, and the sensation follows you into waking. Maybe you forget their face, but the feeling stays the way. Sunlight stays behind your eyelids even after it's gone. Some people report these dreams happening over and over. Over years, the person changes slightly, sometimes older, sometimes younger. Sometimes they say a single word. Sometimes they simply appear, but the feeling never changes. It's not desire, it's not fear. It's something else, something sacred. Jung would not dismiss these dreams. He would not pathologize them. He would say they are real. In the truest psychological sense, real not because they exist in the outer world, but because they reshape the inner one. He often spoke of meaningful coincidence, synchronicity, an inner state that manifests outwardly through a symbol or event. But what if the ultimate synchronicity is not an event, but a soul? What if the person you meet in dreams is a psychic reflection, a symbol of your own wholeness trying to speak through the only language, the unconscious nosimage and intimacy? Here comes the second twist. The person you loved, the one you remember but never met, may not belong to this lifetime. But the love itself was never meant to be about them. It was meant to awaken you, because love, in its deepest form, is a mirror. It shows you what you are capable of feeling. And even if that love is unfulfilled in the outer world, even if it ends, even if it never begins, the truth remains. It has already done its work. To love someone who never stays or never arrives is one of the most painful things the soul can endure. But it is also one of the most transformative. What if the ache you carry is not a wound, but a doorway? What if the empty chair, the unanswered dream, the silence after their name-all of it is sacred? You see, Jung did not believe we suffer for no reason. He believed suffering forces us to go inward, to face what has long been hidden. And what we often find in that darkness is not just pain but possibility. There is a kind of love that never completes itself in this world, because it was never supposed to. It was only meant to stir the self, to return you to something you had forgotten. Your own capacity for devotion, for longing, for depth. In this way, the love that is not returned is still not wasted. It carves space in you. It softens your defense. It teaches you how to stay open in a world that tells you to close. It whispers, you were made to feel deeply. You were made to remember something bigger than this lifetime. Jung's mandala shows us what wholeness looks like. Not perfect symmetry, but perfect integration. Light and dark, known and unknown, longing and letting go. To love someone beyond time is to experience a part of that mandala briefly, brilliantly, and then to let it go, not as a failure, but as a return. The melting clock, the empty seat, the scent that reminds you of someone you've never met. These are not signs of madness. They are symbols, echoes from a place that does not measure life in years, but in awakenings. And the greatest awakening of all is this. The love you thought was about someone else was always a mirror inviting you to love yourself at that depth. Not everyone will understand this kind of love, but if you dove this stirs something you cannot name, then perhaps you've known it too. Perhaps you still do. Love that transcends time is not about holding on. It is not about claiming, proving, or keeping. It is presence quiet, steady, undeniable. It does not require proximity. It asks only for depth, not contact, but connection, not ownership, but awareness. Carl Jung believed that the highest form of love is born from individuation, the process of becoming whole within oneself. When a person has integrated their shadow, confronted their unconscious, and stepped into the full awareness of who they are, they no longer seek love to feel complete. They love because they are complete. Because love, in its most elevated form, is not a need. It is an offering. To love someone and not need them. To hold space for another soul without asking it to fill you. That is sacred. That is rare. And that, Jung would say, is true individuation in action. Because until you can sit with your own aloneness and not feel empty, every attachment will be hunger, dressed as romance. So what does it mean to love someone who isn't there? To feel the weight of someone's presence long after they've gone. Or maybe before they've even arrived? Jung would not ask you to dismiss that. He would ask you to listen, because perhaps the person you are longing for is not meant to arrive in the form you expect. Perhaps their presence in your life is not physical, but spiritual. Perhaps they are not a person, but a mirror, a symbol of something you have yet to embody. In that sense, love becomes less about relationship and more about revelation. The one you love may have appeared in your dreams, in your silence, in the shape of an ache you cannot explain. And yet, what if their purpose was never to stay, but to awaken? We have been taught to measure love by its longevity, by how long it lasts, how tightly it holds, how much it gives. But love that transcends time does not follow those rules. It leaves quietly. It lingers eternally. It arrives without warning and sometimes departs without closure. But it never really leaves, because it is not the body we recognize. It is the soul. This kind of love does not beg to be seen. It does not demand to be known. It simply is, like a song you've never heard but somehow remember, like a whisper that returns in moments of stillness. It is not here to complete a story. It is here to open a door. The door, of course, leads inward. Jung taught that all longing points to something within, that what we search for in others is often what we have not yet found in ourselves. The other is the outer reflection of our own inner absence. So when you long for someone who feels impossibly distant or lost, ask, what part of me do they represent? What voice in me is still waiting to be heard? Here is the third and final twist. It is possible that you once loved someone, before you were born, before your name, before this body. But it is also possible that the person you have been seeking for is not someone else at all. It is you, the you who has grown, the you who has healed, the you who has learned to sit in silence and hear your soul without needing it to speak in someone else's voice. What if the person you are waiting for is the person you are becoming? What if your entire love story has been a circle, not a line? You've searched the world for a hand that feels like home, only to discover that the hand belongs to the self you had abandoned. And now, finally, you return. This is not romanticism. This is recognition. It is not a rejection of love with others. It is the foundation that makes such love possible. Because once you have chosen yourself truly, tenderly, and without condition, you no longer need love to rescue you. You let it accompany you. You no longer chase. You attract. You no longer grasp. You allow. You no longer seek the one. You become the one. Love is no longer about merging. It is about mirroring. When two people have both done this work, when they have met themselves fully, they do not meet to complete each other. They meet to celebrate the completeness they already are. That is love without possession. That is presence. That is the kind of love that transcends time. And it is also the kind of love that begins within you. So if you feel the absence of someone who never came, or if you carry the memory of someone who never stayed, let that ache turn inward. Let it lead you back, not to them, but to yourself, because the greatest love stories are not the ones where someone finally arrives. They are the ones where you finally come home. Love that transcends time does not require a response. It does not need to be returned, affirmed, or named. It lives in the stillness, after longing, in the silence that no longer waits. It exists in awareness in the moment you stop reaching outward and begin to feel the vastness within. When you are no longer searching to be completed, love becomes presence. When you no longer need someone to fill the silence, love becomes your own breath. It is not less powerful for being invisible. In fact, it is more enduring, because it is no longer dependent on the world. It is rooted in the soul. If this video has touched something in you, something quiet and unnamed, leave a comment below saying, "I met them in a dream." And if a part of you still listens for the echo of that one presence, remember you are not alone in that listening. Subscribe to this channel. Sometimes, the message you've been waiting for arrives not from the outside world, but from the place that reminded you to come home to yourself. Maybe, just maybe, that place is here.